Meghan Markle made her first husband agree to a pregnancy contract to make sure that she was afforded every possible luxury if she gave birth to their child.
Something is breaking inside Prince Harry. Not the polished, practiced grief of a man performing for cameras, not the rehearsed vulnerability of someone who has learned exactly how much emotion the public will reward. This is something rawer than that, something private. Something that no PR team can script and no communication strategy can contain. And the man responsible for cracking that carefully maintained facade is not a tabloid journalist. He is not a bitter palace insider. He is not even a member of the royal family. He is a Hollywood producer from Los Angeles named Trevor Engelson, the man Meghan Markle married before any of this, the man she left with nothing more than a FedEx package. And in 2026, after more than a decade of almost supernatural silence, he is reportedly done staying quiet. What does a man hold on to for 10 years? What does it feel like to watch the woman you helped build transform herself into a global icon while quietly erasing every trace of your existence from her story? And what finally breaks a man's commitment to silence after a decade of watching and saying nothing? Those are not rhetorical questions, because the answers, according to sources close to Trevor Engelson, are more explosive than anything the Sussex camp has faced before. And Prince Harry, by multiple accounts, is only now beginning to understand the full weight of what is coming. Stay with us, because what we are about to walk through is not just a celebrity drama. It is the methodical dismantling of one of the most carefully constructed public narratives in modern history. And the man doing the dismantling was there before the narrative even existed. The man who stayed quiet. Before we can understand why Trevor Engelson breaking his silence is such a seismic event, we need to spend a moment understanding exactly who he is, because that context is everything. Trevor Engelson is not a man who needed this. That is the first and most important thing you need to understand. He is a successful, respected Hollywood producer with a genuine career built on real work and real relationships. He has a new wife, a family, 3 children, and a production company that continues to thrive. He had every possible reason to keep his head down, protect his privacy, and let the past stay exactly where he had kept it for over a decade. And that is precisely what makes what is reportedly happening now so significant. For 10 years, Trevor watched from a carefully maintained distance as the woman he had once called his wife reinvented herself with stunning ambition and breathtaking audacity. He watched her graduate from cable television actress to royal duchess. He watched the Oprah interview. He watched the Netflix documentary. He watched the memoir. He watched the brand launches. He watched the public narrative get polished and refined and repackaged until it barely resembled the version of events he had personally lived through. And through all of it, he said nothing. Not a single unauthorized interview. Not an anonymous tip slipped to a tabloid. Not a strategically leaked grievance passed through intermediaries to generate just enough noise without fingerprints. Nothing. In a media ecosystem where everyone with even a peripheral connection to fame eventually finds their moment to cash in, Trevor's silence was not just unusual. It was almost freakishly rare. Ask yourself what that kind of silence signals, because silence of that depth, sustained across that many years, through that many provocations, does not come naturally to most people. It requires discipline. It requires a conscious decision, made and remade day after day, to absorb the erasure of your own role in someone else's story and say nothing in response. What kind of man exercises that level of restraint? And perhaps more importantly, what kind of information does a man sit on for that long before finally deciding the world needs to hear it? According to sources close to Trevor, the answer has nothing to do with money. The memoir deal, which insiders suggest is significant, is not the motivation. The motivation, they say, is something far more fundamental. It is the erosion of truth. It is the slow, systematic removal of reality from a public record that is now so polished, so managed, so deliberately constructed that it bears almost no resemblance to what actually happened. Trevor Engelson was there before the reinvention. He knew Meghan Markle when she was a cable TV actress grinding through auditions in a brutal industry. He helped build her. He supported her through the years when the opportunities were few and the rejections were many. He invested in her professionally and emotionally in ways that her current public narrative has almost entirely erased. And now, reportedly, he has decided that enough is enough. The world deserves to hear the version of events that has been sitting locked behind a decade of dignity and restraint. The question that everyone in Meghan's orbit is reportedly asking at 3 in the morning is exactly what that version contains. The FedEx divorce and what it really revealed. To understand the full scope of what Trevor may be preparing to release, you first need to revisit the event that set everything in motion, because the how of this story matters just as much as the what, and the how began in 2013 with one of the most clinical endings to a marriage in recent Hollywood memory. Trevor was in Los Angeles. Meghan was in Toronto, filming Suits, the legal drama that had given her the first real taste of fame and a rapidly expanding social world that was beginning to look very different from the one she had shared with her husband. The couple had been married for 2 years. By all accounts, Trevor had been a devoted partner. He had used his industry connections to support her career at every turn. He had stood by her through the grinding years of near misses and second-place finishes. He had built a life with her on the assumption that the commitment they had made to each other was genuine. Then came the package, delivered via registered mail. Inside were Meghan's wedding and engagement rings. No phone call, no final conversation, no face-to-face meeting to close a chapter that had started with a genuine commitment. Just a cold, clinical package that reduced years of marriage to something resembling a canceled subscription. Stop and think about what that act communicates, because the method of a breakup is never just logistical. It is always a statement about how much the person leaving values the person being left. When you end a significant relationship through a FedEx package, when you cannot bring yourself to look someone in the eye and have even a brief, difficult conversation, it reveals something essential about your relationship to accountability. It reveals a willingness to treat people as stepping stones, rather than as human beings worthy of basic respect. Trevor was reportedly blindsided. There was no warning, no preparation, no real explanation. One day he was a married man with a partner he had invested years of his life into. The next, he was holding 2 rings and staring at an act so cold it barely qualified as a goodbye. Insiders who knew the couple during those Toronto years have described the period leading up to the divorce as a calculated social migration. As Suits took off and Meghan's profile expanded, her social circle underwent a transformation that those who witnessed it found striking. Old friends, people who had known her before the fame, were quietly filtered out. In their place came high-profile Canadian socialites, power players, and connections who could offer something more valuable than loyalty. What could they offer? Access. Access to rooms she had never been in. Access to conversations she had never been part of. Access to a world that was beginning to feel far more interesting than cable television, and the life she had been building in Los Angeles with a man who had known her before she decided to become someone else. Trevor, by multiple accounts, was left behind. Not just physically, with her in Toronto and him in LA, but emotionally and strategically. He was the man who knew her before the reinvention began. And as we are about to see, that is precisely what makes him so uniquely dangerous to the narrative she has spent a decade constructing. The vision board, the target, and the $100 million miscalculation. Now we arrive at the allegation that has reportedly sent Meghan's entire PR operation into emergency mode. And this is the part of the story that requires your full attention, because what follows changes the way you look at everything that came after it. Meghan Markle told the world during her Oprah interview that she had no idea what she was getting into when she met Prince Harry. She claimed she did not even know who he was before their supposed blind date. She described it as 2 strangers brought together by serendipity, 2 people who connected over nothing more than their shared humanity and found love in the most unexpected of circumstances. It was a beautiful story, emotionally compelling, perfectly constructed for maximum public resonance. The kind of fairy tale that people want to believe, because the alternative is more complicated and far less romantic. But sources who were inside Meghan's inner circle during the Trevor years people who knew her long before she became the Duchess of Sussex, are reportedly telling a very different story. And according to insiders close to Trevor, the rumors of a highly specific vision board have been circulating in certain circles for years. Not a general vision board about happiness or lifestyle goals, not the kind of aspirational collage that life coaches recommend for manifesting abundance. A targeted one that reportedly had a very specific individual at its center, Prince Harry. Let that sit for a moment. Because if these allegations are accurate, the narrative of the star-crossed lovers who met purely by chance is not just one version of events. It is one of the most deliberately constructed romantic fictions of the modern era. Sources suggest that rather than a serendipitous encounter, the meeting was the product of a sustained strategic campaign to position herself in the right circles, at the right time, with access to the right people. Meghan reportedly studied Prince Harry with the focus of someone preparing for the role of a lifetime. His vulnerabilities, his emotional triggers, his well-documented yearning for a family of his own, his isolation within a royal institution that had never fully understood how to handle him, his history with women who had reportedly been frightened away by the crushing scrutiny that came with royal life. He was not just the most eligible bachelor on the planet. According to these sources, he was a carefully identified target, someone whose emotional architecture had been mapped in advance and whose needs were being deliberately addressed by someone who understood exactly what she was doing. Now ask yourself this: if any of this is true, what does it tell us about the Oprah interview, about the Netflix documentary, about the memoir, about every single public presentation of this love story that has been consumed by millions of people around the world who invested genuine emotional energy in believing it was real? But here is where the plan reportedly hit a wall. A very large, very financially significant wall that nobody in the strategy apparently anticipated. According to insiders, the single most catastrophic miscalculation in the entire operation was the assumption that a British prince was a billionaire. It seems almost laughably straightforward in hindsight. Of course, a working royal's wealth is complicated. It is tied up in trusts, subject to institutional oversight, and nowhere near the liquid, freely accessible fortune of a Hollywood entertainment mogul or a Silicon Valley tech executive. But the assumption was apparently made. And when reality arrived in the form of cold hard numbers, when it became clear that being royal came with a budget, and that the royal bank account was not going to fund the kind of lifestyle she had envisioned, the fairy tale hit a ceiling. This, many argue, is the clearest possible explanation for what we are watching play out in Montecito in 2026. The luxury jam, the dog biscuits, the herbal teas. The lifestyle brand launched with tremendous fanfare and increasingly frantic energy. This is not a passion project from a woman who simply loves cooking and gardening. This is a woman who made a calculation that did not add up and is now scrambling to generate independently the kind of wealth she believed came attached to a title. And Trevor Engelson allegedly has the documented receipts on exactly when and how that calculation was being made, before Harry ever entered the picture. Harry's tears and the truth he cannot escape. While Meghan's team has reportedly been operating in full crisis mode, something altogether different and in many ways more revealing has been happening inside the walls of the Montecito mansion. Prince Harry's reaction to everything currently unfolding is not the reaction of a man mounting a defense. It is the reaction of a man breaking. Sources describe Harry in 2026 as visibly, deeply, almost paralyzingly embarrassed. Not the performative vulnerability he has deployed publicly on multiple occasions. Not the strategic emotional transparency that became a signature part of his brand after leaving the royal family. This is something private, something that no communications team was consulted about and no PR strategy can manage. Think about the full weight of what that means. Harry gave up everything for this life. His family, his military titles, his country, his relationship with his father, his relationship with his brother, the world he had grown up in, and the only identity he had ever truly known. He surrendered all of it for a vision of authentic freedom that was sold to him as liberation from an institution that had supposedly failed to protect him. He believed it. He believed all of it. And the depth of his belief is visible in the price he paid for it. And now, in 2026, That vision is being taken apart in public, piece by piece, without his consent and without any way to stop it. Sources close to the Montecito estate describe Harry as exhausted in a way that goes beyond physical tiredness. Emotionally depleted, a man who spent years functioning as the shield for a narrative he genuinely believed in, only to find himself increasingly unable to defend it because the gaps in that narrative are no longer small enough to paper over. He is reportedly spending more and more time in separate areas of the property. He is focusing on his own projects, the Invictus Games, efforts to reconnect with his roots, building something that looks increasingly like a quiet, private escape route back to something more recognizable. The separation between their daily lives is no longer a rumor that can be dismissed with a coordinated denial. Sources describe it as an established pattern: charity events attended independently, business meetings handled separately, public appearances coordinated with the precision of a professional arrangement, rather than two people who chose each other. The power couple image has not just cracked, it has reportedly been quietly set aside by both of them, each navigating the wreckage in their own way. And then there is his father. In April 2026, King Charles made an official visit to the United States. The media speculation was intense and the emotional stakes were enormous. Would this finally be the moment of reconciliation? Would the king meet his grandchildren for the first time in years? Would the bridge back to the family Harry had abandoned begin to be rebuilt? Harry reportedly sent a handwritten letter, a deeply personal gesture from a man not known for making them, expressing what insiders describe as a genuine, desperate desire to reconnect, to begin repairing what had been broken, to find some path back to at least a version of the relationship he had surrendered. The response from the palace was a flat, formal refusal. No meeting. The visit was for official business only. The door, once again, closed. For Harry, this was reportedly devastating in a way that went beyond disappointment. He has reportedly told those closest to him that he genuinely believed a path back to his family was still possible, that the damage, however severe, was not permanent, that there was still a future in which his children knew their grandfather, in which the estrangement, however painful, eventually gave way to something more human. And then he tried to raise this grief with Meghan. He tried to have a conversation about the continued estrangement, about his father's refusal, about what it meant for the children, and for his own sense of who he was without the family he had grown up in. Her response, according to sources, was not empathy. It was not shared sorrow or a moment of genuine connection over a painful reality they were both navigating. It was reportedly a redirection, an insistence that the palace's refusal to meet was connected to the Trevor memoir rumors, that the king's cold shoulder was part of a coordinated campaign to undermine the As Ever brand launch, that everything happening around them was sabotage being orchestrated from London. Harry reportedly told Meghan directly to stop blaming his father for the Trevor situation. Read that again. A man who defended this woman with extraordinary loyalty for years has drawn a line. He has said, in whatever private language married people use when they have run out of diplomatic options, that this particular reframing goes too far, that this connection does not hold, that his father's rejection and the Trevor memoir are not chapters in the same story. For a man of Harry's demonstrated loyalty, this is not a minor moment. It is a significant fracture, and it suggests that whatever reservoir of patience he once had for the victim narrative is running measurably lower than it has ever been before. The memoir without a leash. So what exactly is Trevor reportedly preparing to put into the world? This is the question that insiders say is keeping Meghan's legal team working through the night. The answer begins with something that no amount of money and no team of lawyers can retroactively fix. There is no NDA. When their marriage ended in 2013, Meghan was a cable TV actress. She was not yet a public figure of any global significance. There was no PR team carefully calculating the downstream risks of an unprotected ex-husband. There was no legal architecture built to contain the testimony of someone who had lived in her world and knew the version of events that predated every carefully managed public presentation. She walked away from that marriage with rings returned in a FedEx envelope and apparently with the assumption that Trevor Engelson would never have the leverage or the platform to become a problem. In 2026, that assumption is reportedly the most pressing crisis on her legal team's desk. The absence of an NDA is not just an oversight, it is the entire ballgame, because it means Trevor can say everything, every conversation, every decision, every moment from the years they spent together that contradicts the official story she has been telling the world. He has the timeline, he was there, and he has reportedly spent a decade quietly preserving the documentation to back it up. Insiders suggest that Trevor has emails from the Toronto period, private photographs, correspondence that would provide context to a relationship that has been conspicuously, strategically absent from Meghan's own carefully curated storytelling. The years she spent with him have been nearly excised from her public narrative, which is itself a kind of statement about how significant his testimony could be. But the allegations do not stop at a difficult divorce and a contested love story origin. They reach into territory that the mainstream media has largely avoided for years. Territory concerning questions about the Sussex children, about timelines, about biological realities that would, if substantiated by a credible primary source, move these conversations from the fringes of internet speculation to the front pages of serious publications worldwide. Sources allege that Trevor may have undergone a medical procedure during his marriage to Meghan, a procedure that would have had significant implications for their ability to conceive together. If those allegations are accurate, and if Trevor has documentation to support them, the implications extend far beyond personal embarrassment. They raise questions about the official narratives surrounding Archie and Lilibet's births in a way that no tabloid theory ever has, because this time, the source is someone with direct, verifiable, first-hand knowledge, someone who was legally married to Meghan Markle, someone with medical records and documented history that would transform speculation into something courts and constitutions would have to take seriously. Meghan's legal team is reportedly exploring every possible avenue to block publication: cease and desist letters, threatened injunctions, exhaustive searches for any contractual language from any period of their relationship that might provide even a sliver of legal leverage. But with no NDA, with a source whose decade of silence has built a level of public credibility that cannot be manufactured, and with documentation that apparently predates any of Meghan's PR infrastructure, the options are reportedly narrowing fast. The brand that couldn't hold, and the conspiracy that couldn't carry it. American Riviera Orchard was supposed to cement Meghan's identity as the next great American tastemaker. Instead, it generated mockery. Overpriced jam at prices that made even loyal supporters raise their eyebrows. Trademark applications rejected repeatedly. By early 2026 came the rebrand to As Ever, which critics saw as a desperate attempt to escape the baggage of a failed launch. Then the logo scandal, with a Spanish town publicly identifying what appeared to be a striking resemblance between Meghan's new brand logo and their ancient coat of arms. The story went global. Meghan's response to every setback followed the same template. The trademark rejection was not a legal miscalculation. The logo resemblance was not inadequate research. The brand failures were not an overpriced product with an unclear market. Every obstacle was coordinated sabotage from the royal family. The King's April 2026 refusal to meet, sabotage timed to damage the brand launch, the Trevor memoir, orchestrated from London. But something has shifted. Even sympathetic observers are asking a question that is proving difficult to answer. Why would a king managing a cancer diagnosis and running a functioning monarchy care about a jam company in California? The logic, examined seriously, does not hold. And when the logic of a narrative cracks, the narrative built on it cracks with it. The friends who disappeared. Here is one of the most quietly significant developments of 2026, and one that is easy to miss if you are not watching closely. The people who were once Meghan's most powerful advocates have gone silent, not stepped back, not dialed it down, silent. Cast your mind back to the early California years. The protective circle around Harry and Meghan was genuinely formidable. Oprah Winfrey gave them the platform for the most watched interview of the decade and appeared to do so with genuine personal investment in their story. Serena Williams was a vocal, visible public advocate. George and Amal Clooney, one of the most influential couples in Hollywood, were reportedly close allies. The message from the entertainment industry's elite was loud and coordinated. We stand with the Sussexes. That message is no longer being sent. When as ever launched in early 2026, the silence from former allies was a statement of its own. No high-profile endorsements, no celebrity unboxing videos, no social media endorsements from the people who once championed this narrative with such visible enthusiasm. The Oprah camp went quiet. The Serena connection appears to have cooled to the point of being unrecognizable from what it once was. The broad coalition of A-list support that once surrounded the couple has dissolved with the quiet efficiency that Hollywood reserves for associations that are no longer serving anyone's interests. Why? Because Hollywood, for all its public virtue and performative solidarity, is fundamentally a business. And in business, you align yourself with brands that are trending upward, associations that enhance your reputation, and narratives that are still generating the kind of cultural energy that translates into real-world leverage. The Sussex brand is not trending upward. It is, in the language of the industry, radioactive. It generates controversy that is perpetually exhausting, drama that cannot be managed, and headlines that no longer move the needle in any direction that benefits anyone standing next to it. The A-list has moved on. There are fresher narratives, cleaner partnerships, and less complicated causes. For Meghan, this is not a social disappointment. It is a structural collapse. Her entire post-royal strategy was built on the premise that Hollywood relationships could substitute for the institutional support of the royal family. That celebrity alliances could provide the platform and protection she had given up when she walked away from the monarchy. Without those alliances, the Montecito operation becomes exactly what it now appears to be. Two people in a very large house, fighting battles on multiple fronts, with fewer and fewer people willing to fight alongside them. A prince without a kingdom. Somewhere inside all of this is a deeply human story. The story of a man who paid an almost incomprehensible price for a life built on a belief that is now collapsing around him. Harry gave up his family, his titles, his country, and his identity. He gave up the only world he had ever belonged to because someone told him something better existed on the other side. In 2026, the reckoning for that belief is playing out in ways no spin can soften. The Trevor situation cuts to the very foundation. If the allegations prove accurate, if the story of how they met and fell in love is revealed to have been something different beneath the surface, then Harry is not just publicly embarrassed. He is privately confronting the possibility that everything he sacrificed was made in service of a story that was not entirely true. The bridges he burned, the relationships he destroyed, all of it. Sources suggest he is sitting with exactly that question, and the weight of it is visible in everything being reported from inside that Montecito mansion. What comes next, and why it cannot be stopped? The clock is ticking on the memoir. Sources suggest the deal is close, the receipts are real, and the legal options to prevent publication are almost exhausted. And if it lands, the consequences will not unfold gradually. They will be immediate, and they will be total. A memoir from Trevor Engelson would not be another critical voice in a crowded field of Sussex commentary. It would be a primary source, someone who was there, someone who has documentation predating any PR operation, any legal team, any communication strategy, someone who spent 10 years building credibility through silence. When Trevor says something, people will believe it, because the man who stays quiet for a decade carries an authority that the man who talks immediately never earns. The allegations about biological realities, medical histories, and birth narratives that contradict official accounts would migrate from internet speculation to mainstream front pages. The palace, which has historically maintained silence on such matters precisely to avoid constitutional crisis, would face a dilemma without precedent. And the constitutional implications, if the succession narrative was built on something false, would create a situation with no clean resolution. For Harry, the choices are narrowing in real time. Return to an institution that has largely continued without him. Stay in California and manage a marriage that sources describe as increasingly strained. Or find some third path that allows him to rebuild something sustainable from the wreckage of a gamble that may not have paid out the way he was promised. For Meghan, the window for narrative control is closing. Every story requires a protagonist who is fundamentally believable. When the first person who truly knew you before the performance began decides to tell his version, and when his version comes back by documentation that no one anticipated, the story you have been telling about yourself is no longer the definitive account. It becomes one version, and possibly not the most accurate one. What this moment actually means. Step back from the individual players for a moment, because what is happening here is bigger than Trevor Engelson, bigger than Meghan Markle, bigger even than the British royal family and the constitutional questions swirling around it. There is a cultural reckoning underway. For years, the Sussex story was powered by something very specific and very potent: the emotional appeal of the outsider narrative, the mixed-race American actress, the younger, freer prince, the suffocating institution, the brave couple who walked away from privilege to live authentically on their own terms. It was a story designed to resonate, and it resonated powerfully with millions of people who invested genuine emotion in it. But stories have architecture, and the architecture of the Sussex narrative depended entirely on one foundational premise: that Meghan was a genuine outsider, someone who stumbled into royalty through love, someone who was mistreated by an institution that could not accept her difference, someone who fought back with nothing but her truth. If Trevor's account establishes that the stumbling was actually engineered, that the love story was partially constructed, that the victim status was a carefully adopted position rather than an authentic experience, then the architecture does not just develop cracks, it collapses completely, because the entire emotional case rested on the premise of authenticity, and authenticity, once convincingly contradicted, cannot be restored through statements and rebranding exercises. The public can forgive ambition. They can forgive flaws and contradictions and human complexity. What they find genuinely difficult to forgive is the feeling of being deceived, of having invested emotional energy in a story that was, beneath the surface, a performance designed to produce exactly the reaction it produced. That is the real power of Trevor's testimony, not any single specific allegation, as serious as those allegations are, but the possibility that it triggers a mass reassessment, a moment when millions of people who followed this story closely look back at the Oprah interview and the Netflix documentary and the memoir and the brand launches and ask themselves a single devastating question: what was real? Trevor Engelson spent over a decade saying nothing. He watched the woman he once loved become one of the most famous and polarizing figures on the planet. He watched his own existence in her story get systematically erased. He built his own life, found his own peace, and exercised a restraint that in the media world of 2026 is almost incomprehensible. But silence, as we have seen, has an expiration date. Prince Harry is reportedly in tears, not the tears of a man performing vulnerability for a sympathetic audience. The private, exhausted tears of someone watching the ground shift beneath everything he believed he was standing on. The man who gave up a kingdom for a story is watching that story be contested by the man who knew it before it was ever told. And do you believe that when Trevor's account reaches the public, it will finally shift the conversation? And if the memoir lands with the full force that insiders are predicting, what do you think Prince Harry does next? Does he stay? Does he fight? Or does he finally, quietly, begin finding his own way back? Leave your thoughts below. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next chapter of this story is moving faster than anyone anticipated, and when it breaks, you will want to be here.